I'm Sarah, 29, and 3 weeks ago, I was worth $16.9 million. Today, I'm single, homeless, and holding papers that prove my own fiancé's family tried to steal everything I'd built over 7 years. What started as a beautiful wedding preparation turned into the most devastating betrayal of my life when his mother walked into our rehearsal dinner with a notary and documents that would have signed away my tech company to their family trust. The worst part? My fiancé knew. What happens when the people you trust most become your biggest threat? Can you predict how this story ends? Hit that like button if you think karma came full circle, subscribe for more family drama stories, and let's dive into how a $16.9 million empire almost disappeared with a single signature, and how I made sure justice was served cold. 7 years ago, I was a broke computer science graduate working 16-hour days in my studio apartment, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. My idea was simple. Create software that would revolutionize how small businesses manage their inventory and customer relationships. While my college friends were landing comfortable corporate jobs with steady paychecks, I was maxing out credit cards and borrowing money from anyone willing to listen to my pitch. The early days were brutal. I coded until my eyes burned, pitched to investors who barely looked up from their phones, and watched my bank account hover dangerously close to zero for months. My parents thought I was crazy. "Why don't you get a real job?" my mom would ask during our weekly calls. "This startup thing is just a phase." But something inside me refused to give up. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe it was vision, but I knew I had something special. The breakthrough came in year 3, when a mid-sized retail chain agreed to pilot my software. Their sales increased by 23% in the first quarter, and suddenly, everyone wanted to know about the young woman who'd created this game-changing platform. Word spread through industry networks, and within 6 months, I had more clients than I could handle. I incorporated Invention Tech Solutions and brought on my first employees, brilliant minds who believed in the vision as much as I did. We weren't just building software, we were creating something that would fundamentally change how businesses operated. The company culture I fostered was built on innovation, transparency, and the kind of work ethic that came from knowing we were building something from nothing. By year 5, we'd secured series of funding. Major investors were flying in from Silicon Valley, offering terms that made my head spin. I remember sitting in my first board meeting, looking around the mahogany table at suits who were throwing around numbers that used to be my annual salary goals. The feeling was surreal. Terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. The growth was exponential. Fortune 500 companies started reaching out. My software was being used by businesses across 43 states, and international expansion was on the horizon. Forbes featured me in their 30 Under 30 list. TechCrunch called me the inventory management queen. The girl who used to count coins for groceries was now being invited to speak at conferences about entrepreneurship and innovation. But success came with its own challenges. The bigger Invention Tech grew, the more complex everything became. Legal structures, tax implications, intellectual property protection, I had to learn fast. I worked with the best attorneys money could buy to set up proper corporate structures, ensuring that my personal assets were protected and the company's intellectual property was ironclad. The valuation kept climbing. After our Series B round, Invention Tech was valued at $16.9 million. I owned 67% of the company, with the rest distributed among key employees and investors. On paper, I was worth more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. But the number felt abstract, like monopoly money. The real value was in what we'd built, a platform that was changing lives, creating jobs, and solving real problems for real people. That's when I met David. He was charming, supportive of my career, and seemed genuinely impressed by what I'd accomplished. For the first time in years, I felt like I could have both professional success and personal happiness. Looking back now, I realize I should have paid more attention to how quickly he integrated himself into every aspect of my life, including learning intimate details about my business that I'd never shared with anyone outside my legal team. Little did I know that my greatest professional triumph was about to become the target of the most personal betrayal I'd ever experienced. David and I had been together for 8 months when he suggested I meet his family. "They are going to love you," he assured me as we drove to his childhood home in the affluent suburbs. "Mom's been dying to meet the woman who's captured my heart." His confidence was infectious, and I found myself genuinely excited about this next step in our relationship. The Hartwell family home was impressive, a sprawling colonial with perfectly manicured lawns and the kind of generational wealth that whispered rather than shouted. David's mother, Patricia, greeted us at the door with a smile that was warm but assessing. She was elegant in that understated way that comes from old money, wearing simple but expensive clothing and jewelry that had probably been in the family for decades. "So you're the famous entrepreneur," Patricia said, extending her hand. "David tells us you've built quite the little business." The word "little" stung, but I attributed it to generational differences in how women in business were perceived. I was determined to make a good impression. Dinner was an interrogation disguised as conversation. Patricia asked probing questions about my company's structure, my investors, my long-term plans. At first, I was flattered by her interest. Here was a successful woman, she'd run her own interior design firm for 20 years, who seemed genuinely curious about my work. I found myself sharing details I normally kept private, explaining our growth trajectory, our client base, even our revenue streams. "How fascinating," she said, cutting into her perfectly prepared salmon. "And you own all of this yourself?" When I explained my ownership structure, her eyes sharpened with interest. 67% is quite substantial. You must have excellent legal protection in place." David's father, Richard, was quieter but equally inquisitive. He asked about our intellectual property protections, our corporate structure, and whether I'd considered estate planning. "Smart woman like you," he said, raising his wine glass, "you probably have everything locked up tight." I laughed, confirming that yes, I'd worked with top-tier attorneys to ensure everything was properly structured and protected. The evening progressed pleasantly enough, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being studied rather than welcomed. Patricia's questions felt less like motherly interest and more like due diligence. When she asked about prenuptial agreements, "Just curious about your thoughts on financial protection in marriage," I deflected with humor, but something cold settled in my stomach. Over the following weeks, as David and I grew more serious, the family dinners became regular occurrences. Each time, Patricia would steer conversations toward my business with laser focus. She'd ask about market competitors, expansion plans, potential acquisition offers. "I'm just so impressed," she'd say, "by how much you've built at such a young age. You must be very proud of creating something so valuable." David seemed oblivious to his mother's intense interest in my finances. When I mentioned it to him privately, he laughed it off. "She's just fascinated by successful women. Remember, she built her own business too. She probably sees herself in you." His explanation made sense, and I pushed down my growing unease. The real red flag should have been when Patricia started asking about my daily operations, who had access to what, how decisions were made, what would happen to the company if something happened to me. "Just worried about David's future," she explained with a concerned smile. "You know how much he loves you. I'd hate for him to be left with nothing if life took an unexpected turn." I began to notice that family gatherings felt less like social occasions and more like business meetings. Patricia would bring out her iPad, claiming she was just taking notes about interesting business strategies as I spoke. Richard would nod thoughtfully and ask follow-up questions that seemed designed to map out every aspect of my corporate structure. The breaking point came during a casual lunch when Patricia suggested I should definitely consider bringing David into the business in some capacity. When I explained that Invention Tech had specific operational needs and David's background in marketing didn't align with our current openings, her expression shifted. "Oh, I wasn't thinking about him as an employee," she clarified. "I was thinking more about ownership. Partnership. Marriage is about sharing everything, after all." That conversation haunted me for days. I began paying closer attention to the family dynamics, noticing how quickly conversations shifted to my company whenever I was present. I observed how Patricia would exchange meaningful glances with Richard when I shared business updates. Most troubling of all, I realized that David was contributing more specific questions about my operations than someone with his business background should have been able to formulate. When I finally confronted David about his family's unusual interest in my financial affairs, his response was immediate and defensive. "They are just proud of what you've accomplished," he insisted. "Mom's always been business-minded. She's trying to connect with you." But something in his eyes suggested he knew more than he was admitting. I started keeping more business details to myself, sharing less during family dinners, and deflecting their increasingly specific questions. The warmth in Patricia's manner began to cool noticeably. Family gatherings became tense affairs where I felt like a specimen under a microscope rather than a welcomed future daughter-in-law. Looking back, every warning sign was there. I just chose to interpret love as curiosity and interest as support. The biggest mistake was assuming that people who claimed to care about my happiness weren't already planning to profit from it. David proposed on a crisp October evening at the same restaurant where we'd had our first date. He'd planned everything perfectly: rose petals, candlelight, even convinced the string quartet to play my favorite song. When he dropped to one knee with a stunning vintage ring that had belonged to his grandmother, I was genuinely moved. "Sarah," he said, his voice shaking with emotion, "you've made me the happiest man alive. Will you marry me?" The ring was breathtaking. A 2.5-carat diamond surrounded by sapphires in an Art Deco setting that must have been worth a fortune. As I said yes through tears of joy, applause erupted from nearby tables. David had somehow arranged for both our families to be dining in the restaurant that evening, creating a surprise celebration that felt like something out of a romantic movie. Patricia was the first to embrace me, and for a moment, her warmth felt genuine. "Welcome to the family, sweetheart," she whispered in my ear. "We are going to take such good care of you." At the time, those words felt comforting. Only later would I understand their true meaning. The engagement party planning began immediately, and Patricia inserted herself into every detail with the enthusiasm of a professional event coordinator. "I've been dreaming of this day since David was born," she confessed as we sampled caterers. "A mother always imagines her son's wedding, and now I get to help plan the perfect celebration for both of you." Initially, I was grateful for her involvement. Planning a wedding while running a rapidly growing company was overwhelming, and Patricia's connections in the social scene meant access to vendors and venues that were normally booked years in advance. She secured us the ballroom at the country club, arranged for the best florist in the city, and even convinced a renowned wedding planner to squeeze us into her schedule. But Patricia's helpfulness came with strings attached. She insisted on reviewing our guest list, claiming she needed to ensure proper seating arrangements. When I provided the names of my business partners, key employees, and major investors, she spent an unusual amount of time researching each person. "I want to make sure everyone feels appropriately welcomed," she explained, but her questions about their relationships to my company felt more like intelligence gathering than party planning. The gift registry became another battlefield. Patricia pushed for expensive household items, crystal, silver, artwork, while I preferred practical gifts that David and I could actually use. Darling, she said with a condescending smile, you're going to be part of an established family now. People will expect a certain level of sophistication. The implication that my taste wasn't sophisticated enough stung, but I tried to compromise. Most concerning was her sudden interest in our wedding timeline. Have you two discussed combining finances yet? She asked during a dress shopping trip. It's so important to get these practical matters settled before the big day. You know, legal protections, asset consolidation, that sort of thing. When I mentioned that David and I hadn't really discussed specific financial arrangements, Patricia's eyes lit up. Oh, you absolutely must. With your business being so successful, you'll want everything properly structured. Richard and I could recommend some excellent attorneys who specialize in marital asset protection. I thanked her for the offer, but explained that I already had trusted legal counsel. Her expression tightened almost imperceptibly. Of course, dear. I'm sure your lawyers are perfectly competent for smaller matters. But marriage to someone from our family involves complex considerations. Generational wealth, trust structures, tax implications, it's quite specialized. The pressure intensified as our engagement continued. Family dinners became strategy sessions where Patricia would bring up hypothetical scenarios about business ownership in marriage. Just thinking out loud, she'd say, but wouldn't it be wonderful if your company could benefit from our family's investment expertise? Richard has such a brilliant mind for growing wealth. David seemed caught between his mother's enthusiasm and my growing discomfort. When I expressed concern about his family's intense interest in my business affairs, he'd reassure me that they were just trying to help. But I noticed he never actually told them to back off. The breaking point came during a couple's dinner when Patricia suggested we might want to restructure Sarah's business before the wedding for tax advantages. She'd apparently consulted with her financial advisor, who'd identified several ways my company could benefit from strategic family partnerships. That night, I made a decision that would prove to be the most important of my life. I contacted my attorney and asked him to review all my corporate structures and legal protections. I want to make absolutely certain, I told him, that my business assets are completely secure and can't be affected by marriage or any other personal relationships. He assured me that my current structure was sound, but suggested we could add additional layers of protection if I was concerned. Prenups are common, he said, but there are other legal instruments we could implement to ensure your business remains entirely separate from any marital assets. I authorized him to proceed with maximum protection protocols. If David truly loved me for who I was, not what I was worth, then legal protections wouldn't matter to him. But if there were ulterior motives at play, I'd be ready. As our wedding date approached, I found myself paying close attention to the family dynamics around me. What I discovered would change everything I thought I knew about the people I was about to legally bind myself to forever. Something inside me wouldn't let go of the nagging suspicion that Patricia's interest in my business went beyond typical mother-in-law curiosity. 2 months before our wedding, I made a decision that felt like betraying my own fiancé. I hired a private investigator to look into the Hartwell family's finances and recent activities. The investigator, Marcus Chen, had been recommended by my attorney for his discretion and thoroughness in corporate investigations. I'm not looking to destroy anyone, I explained during our initial meeting. I just need to know if there's something I should be aware of before I legally bind myself to this family. Marcus nodded understandingly. Apparently, premarital financial investigations were more common than I'd realized. Within a week, Marcus delivered a preliminary report that made my blood run cold. The Hartwell family's financial situation was far more precarious than their lifestyle suggested. Richard's commercial real estate ventures had taken massive hits during recent market downturns. Patricia's interior design business was hemorrhaging money, sustained only by loans secured against their home. Most shocking of all, they'd borrowed heavily against David's trust fund to cover mounting debts. They are essentially house poor, Marcus explained, spreading documents across his desk. The appearance of wealth is maintained through credit and leveraging assets that are already overextended. Based on my analysis, they are approximately 18 months away from serious financial crisis without a significant cash infusion. My hands trembled as I reviewed bank statements, loan documents, and credit reports that painted a picture of a family desperately trying to maintain appearances while drowning in debt. The elegant lifestyle, the country club membership, even the expensive engagement ring, all of it was financed through loans they couldn't afford to repay. But Marcus wasn't finished. His deeper investigation revealed a pattern of behavior that was even more disturbing. In the past 5 years, he continued, Patricia Hartwell has been involved in 3 separate business partnerships that ended in legal disputes over asset ownership. Each time, she claimed joint ownership of businesses that had been built by her partner's independent efforts. The documentation was damning. Patricia had a history of inserting herself into successful businesses through personal relationships, then using legal manipulation to claim ownership stakes. Her own sister had sued her in 2019 over a boutique business Patricia had allegedly co-invested in, but later claimed majority control over. A college friend had filed bankruptcy after Patricia successfully argued in court that a successful bakery was actually a joint venture, despite having contributed only emotional support and social connections. She has a pattern, Marcus explained, highlighting key passages in legal documents. She builds personal relationships with successful business people, gains their trust, learns intimate details about their operations, then uses legal mechanisms to claim ownership rights. She's particularly effective with younger women who view her as a mentor figure. My stomach churned as I recognized my own situation in these case studies. The probing questions about my business structure, the suggestions about family partnerships, the pressure to involve David in company decisions, it all suddenly made perfect sense. I wasn't just marrying into a family, I was being systematically targeted for a sophisticated financial takeover. Marcus presented evidence of recent activities that confirmed my worst fears. Patricia had been meeting regularly with attorneys who specialized in marital asset disputes. Phone records showed multiple conversations with financial planners who helped wealthy families optimize asset distribution during family transitions. Most damning of all, she'd been researching the specific legal structure of my company through public records and industry connections. She knows exactly what your business is worth, Marcus said, showing me printed emails he'd obtained through legal channels. And she has detailed information about your ownership structure, your key intellectual property, and your growth projections. This isn't casual interest, this is strategic planning. The investigation revealed that David wasn't an innocent bystander in his family's schemes. Phone records showed regular conversations between him and his mother specifically about Sarah's business opportunities and integration strategies. Text messages between David and his father discussed timeline considerations and approach methodologies that clearly referenced our relationship and upcoming marriage. Most heartbreaking was discovering that David had been feeding information about my daily business operations to his family throughout our entire relationship. Those casual conversations about my work challenges, my growth plans, my investor relationships, David had been systematically reporting everything back to his parents, who were using the intelligence to plan their approach. Marcus presented me with a timeline that showed the correlation between family financial crises and their intensified interest in my personal life. Patricia's first business partnership lawsuit had been filed just 2 months before David started pursuing me aggressively. Richard's real estate losses had accelerated precisely when family dinners became focused on my company's expansion plans. The private investigator's final report included recorded conversations, obtained legally through sources I didn't ask about, that revealed the family's true intentions. In one particularly damning phone call between Patricia and Richard, she explicitly stated, once they are married, we can argue community property rights and demand partnership status in her company. With proper legal representation, we could easily claim 50% ownership of everything she's built. Sitting in Marcus's office, surrounded by evidence of the most elaborate betrayal I'd ever experienced, I felt my entire world shift. The man I'd planned to spend my life with had been systematically gathering intelligence about my business for his family's financial benefit. The woman who'd positioned herself as a supportive mother figure was actually a predator who'd targeted me like prey. But Marcus had more to reveal. His investigation had uncovered the specific plan for our wedding day, a plan that involved legal documents, strategic timing, and a level of manipulation that was as brilliant as it was devastating. What they had planned for our wedding day would determine whether I'd spend the rest of my life fighting for control of the company I'd built with my own hands. The question now was, what was I going to do with this information? Armed with the private investigator's evidence, I faced the most difficult decision of my life: confront David directly or continue gathering intelligence while planning my counterattack. The woman who'd built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing wasn't about to let anyone steal what she'd earned, even if it meant sacrificing the relationship she thought was built on love. I chose strategy over emotion. For the next 3 weeks, I played the role of blissful bride-to-be, while secretly consulting with my legal team about protection strategies. My attorney, Jonathan Mills, reviewed Marcus's evidence with the cold precision of someone who'd seen similar schemes before. This is sophisticated, he admitted, but not uncommon. Wealthy families targeting successful entrepreneurs through romantic relationships is an old playbook with new techniques. Jonathan recommended a multi-layered protection strategy that would make my assets completely untouchable, regardless of marriage laws or community property rights. We established additional holding companies, restructured ownership through irrevocable trusts, and created legal barriers that would require years of litigation to challenge, litigation that would cost more than the Hartwell family could afford. But the real genius of our plan involved something far more elegant than legal protection. We decided to let them reveal their true intentions publicly, creating evidence that would destroy any future legal claims while exposing their scheme to everyone who mattered in both our personal and professional lives. The breakthrough came when Marcus intercepted communications revealing the family's specific timeline for their takeover attempt. They planned to approach me with partnership agreements during our honeymoon, claiming that married couples should combine their business interests for tax advantages and estate planning purposes. If I refused, they had backup plans involving community property laws and potential litigation that could freeze my company's operations during legal proceedings. Patricia had already consulted with attorneys about forcing a business partnership through marriage laws, claiming that David's emotional support and business advice during our relationship constituted grounds for ownership stakes. They'd researched precedent cases where spouses had successfully claimed portions of businesses that predated marriage by arguing they'd contributed to growth and development during the relationship period. Most chilling was discovering that they'd planned our wedding timeline specifically to coincide with a major acquisition offer my company had received. If they could establish legal claims to partnership rights before I signed the acquisition deal, they'd essentially be entitled to half of a potential $50 million buyout that was being negotiated by interested investors. The wedding planning became a carefully orchestrated performance. I continued attending family dinners, smiling through Patricia's increasingly pointed suggestions about combining resources and strategic business partnerships. I nodded enthusiastically when she recommended specific attorneys for post-marriage financial planning. I even allowed her to schedule meetings with financial advisors who specialized in marital asset optimization. But behind the scenes, I was building an impenetrable fortress around everything I'd worked to create. Additional layers of legal protection were implemented so quietly that not even my own employees knew about the restructuring. My ownership stakes were moved into trusts that couldn't be affected by marriage, divorce, or any other personal relationship changes. The most satisfying part of my counter-strategy involved feeding false information back through the pipeline David had created. I began sharing fictional details about company vulnerabilities, non-existent legal loopholes, and imaginary investor concerns. If David was going to spy on me for his family's benefit, I was going to make sure they received intelligence that would lead them into a trap of their own making. 2 weeks before our wedding, Patricia made her most aggressive move yet. She arranged a casual lunch that turned into a high-pressure sales presentation about why I should bring David into my company as a partner before our marriage. "It's really about protecting both of you," she explained, producing professionally prepared documents that outlined partnership structures and profit-sharing agreements. The documents were sophisticated, clearly prepared by experienced attorneys who understood exactly what they were trying to achieve. They proposed making David a full partner in Invention Tech Solutions with shared decision-making authority and equal profit distribution. The legal language was designed to make the arrangement appear beneficial to me while actually giving the Hartwell family complete control over my business operations. "We've had our attorneys review everything," Patricia continued, her mask of maternal concern barely concealing her predatory excitement. "This structure would give you tremendous tax advantages while ensuring that your life partner is fully invested in your success. It's really a win-win situation for everyone involved." I reviewed the documents with feigned interest, asking questions that I already knew the answers to, pretending to consider arrangements that would have destroyed everything I'd built. The entire presentation felt surreal. This woman was sitting across from me, smiling warmly, while attempting to orchestrate the most sophisticated theft I'd ever encountered. That evening, I shared the documents with Jonathan, who confirmed what I already knew. Accepting their proposal would have effectively transferred majority control of my company to the Hartwell family within 6 months. The legal structure they'd created included clauses that would have allowed them to dilute my ownership, make major business decisions without my consent, and potentially force me out of my own company through strategic litigation. "They've done this before," Jonathan observed, highlighting specific language in the contracts. "These clauses are too sophisticated for a first attempt. This is a proven methodology they've refined through previous schemes." The final piece of evidence I needed came from an unexpected source, David himself. 1 week before our wedding, he made a crucial mistake that revealed just how deeply he was involved in his family's plan. During what I thought was a romantic dinner celebrating our upcoming marriage, he casually mentioned specific details about my company's intellectual property that I had never shared with him, information that could only have come from corporate documents he'd had no legitimate access to. When I pressed him about how he'd learned these details, his explanation was rehearsed but unconvincing. He'd overheard me on business calls and remembered things I'd mentioned casually. But the information was too specific, too technical, and too confidential for his explanation to be credible. That night, I knew with absolute certainty that the man I'd planned to marry was fully complicit in his family's scheme to steal my life's work. The loving relationship I'd believed in was actually an elaborate con game designed to separate me from my assets through legal manipulation and emotional exploitation. But they had underestimated the woman they'd chosen to target. The same intelligence and determination that had built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing was about to be turned against them in ways they never anticipated. The wedding was 3 days away, and I was ready to spring the trap I'd been carefully constructing for weeks. The rehearsal dinner was held at the country club's private dining room, an elegant space with crystal chandeliers and windows overlooking the golf course, where I'd soon discover just how far the Hartwell family was willing to go. 50 of our closest friends and family members were gathered to celebrate what everyone believed would be the prelude to a beautiful wedding. I smiled, laughed, and played the part of the happy bride-to-be while internally preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. Patricia had been unusually attentive all evening, refilling my wine glass and steering conversations toward how excited she was to welcome me into their family. "Tomorrow changes everything," she whispered conspiratorially, as we watched David give his rehearsal speech. "You're going to love being a Hartwell, sweetheart. We take care of our own." The real show began during coffee service. Patricia stood up and asked for everyone's attention, claiming she wanted to share a special surprise for Sarah before tomorrow's big day. From her purse, she produced an elegant folder tied with a silk ribbon, the kind of presentation that suggested something far more significant than a sentimental gift. "David and I thought this would be the perfect time," she announced with a warm smile that didn't reach her eyes, "to present Sarah with her wedding gift from the family. It's something that will secure both their futures and ensure that their partnership extends into every aspect of their lives together." She handed me the folder with theatrical flourish, and I opened it knowing exactly what I'd find inside: professionally prepared partnership agreements that would make David a co-owner of my company, effective immediately upon our marriage. The documents were even more comprehensive than what she'd shown me the previous week, including additional clauses that would have given the entire Hartwell family indirect control over Invention Tech Solutions. "It's a business partnership agreement," Patricia explained to our confused guests, her voice filled with the pride of someone unveiling a masterpiece. "We want Sarah to know that David is committed to being her full partner in every sense of the word. This makes him an equal owner in her company, ensuring that their professional and personal lives are completely integrated." The room fell silent as people processed what they were witnessing. My parents looked confused and concerned. David's father nodded approvingly from his seat. Several of my business associates exchanged glances that suggested they understood the implications of what was being proposed. But the real surprise came when Patricia gestured toward the back of the room. "And to make everything official tonight, we've arranged for a notary to be present so Sarah can sign these documents before tomorrow's ceremony. That way, they can start their married life as true partners in every sense." A professional-looking woman in a business suit stepped forward, carrying the leather portfolio, an official seal that identified her as a licensed notary public. The trap wasn't just being sprung, it was being executed in front of 50 witnesses, who could later testify that I'd signed the documents willingly during a joyful family celebration. The audacity was breathtaking. They'd planned to manipulate me into signing away half of my life's work in front of everyone I cared about, using social pressure and the emotional atmosphere of our wedding celebration to coerce my compliance. The notary's presence meant the documents would be legally binding immediately, with no cooling-off period or opportunity to reconsider. David stood up, his face flushed with what I'd initially interpreted as embarrassment, but now recognized as excitement. "Mom thought this would be a beautiful gesture," he said, reaching for my hand. "A way to show everyone that we are committed to building our future together. Sarah, you've worked so hard to build something amazing, and now we get to grow it together, as husband and wife." The room was watching expectantly. Patricia had positioned herself next to the notary, ready to guide me through signing documents that would have destroyed everything I'd worked to achieve. Several guests were already applauding, assuming they were witnessing a romantic gesture rather than an attempted financial coup. This was my moment. I could either expose their scheme publicly, creating a scandal that would destroy relationships and reputations, or I could play along and sign documents that I knew were worthless due to the legal protections I'd already implemented. Either way, I was about to reveal just how badly they'd underestimated the woman they'd targeted. I stood up slowly, holding the partnership documents, and looked around the room at faces filled with anticipation. "This is incredible," I said, my voice carrying to every corner of the dining room. "I'm absolutely amazed by the thought and planning that went into this surprise." Patricia beamed with satisfaction, interpreting my words as surrender. David squeezed my hand encouragingly. The notary stepped forward with her official seal, ready to make their scheme legally binding. "Before I sign anything," I continued, maintaining my smile while pulling out my phone, "I think everyone should understand exactly what these documents represent. I activated the speaker function and dialed a number I'd memorized for this exact moment. Jonathan Mills, attorney, came the crisp voice from my phone's speaker. Jonathan, this is Sarah. I'm at my rehearsal dinner, and the Hartwell family has just presented me with business partnership documents they'd like me to sign tonight with a notary present. Could you please explain to everyone here what these documents would actually accomplish? The room fell completely silent. Patricia's face went white. David dropped my other hand like it was on fire. Jonathan's voice filled the dining room with legal precision. Sarah, if you're referring to the documents I reviewed last week, those agreements would transfer majority control of Invention Tech Solutions to David Hartwell and potentially his family members. The ownership structure they've proposed would allow them to make unilateral business decisions, dilute your equity stakes, and potentially force you out of the company you created. In my professional opinion, signing those documents would be financially devastating and legally questionable given the timing and circumstances. The silence in the room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop as 50 people processed the revelation that they'd just witnessed an attempted business takeover disguised as a wedding gift. But I wasn't finished. I had one more surprise that would ensure this betrayal was documented and witnessed in a way that would protect me legally while exposing their true intentions to everyone who mattered. The real fireworks were just beginning. The aftermath of Jonathan's announcement through my phone speaker was immediate and devastating. Patricia's carefully constructed facade crumbled in real time as she realized her elaborate scheme had been exposed in front of 50 witnesses, including several prominent members of the business community, who could destroy her reputation with a single conversation. Sarah, sweetheart, there's been a misunderstanding, she stammered, her voice lacking its usual confident authority. These documents are just standard marriage protections. Your attorney is clearly misinterpreting. Actually, I interrupted, pulling out a second phone that had been recording the entire evening. Let me play back exactly what you told me about these documents when you presented them privately last week. The recording was crystal clear. Patricia's own voice filled the dining room as she detailed how the partnership agreements would give David full access to Sarah's business operations and allow the family to finally benefit from all the success Sarah has achieved. Her words about strategic control and profit optimization left no doubt about their true intentions. David tried to salvage the situation. Sarah, you're making this sound like something it's not. We just wanted to. David, I said calmly, looking directly at him, would you like me to play the recording of you and your mother discussing my company's acquisition offers and how you could maximize family benefit from the timing of our marriage? His face went ashen. Around the room, guests were beginning to murmur among themselves, piecing together what they were witnessing. My parents looked shocked but proud. David's relatives were studying their plates, clearly uncomfortable with the public exposure of their family's schemes. The notary, realizing she'd been brought into a potentially fraudulent situation, quietly packed up her materials and headed for the exit. Patricia watched her leave with the expression of someone seeing her carefully laid plans disintegrate in real time. But my biggest surprise was yet to come. From my purse, I pulled out a thick envelope sealed with my attorney's official letterhead. Since we are making everything official tonight, I announced to the room, I have some documents of my own to share. I opened the envelope and withdrew several legal documents, each bearing official seals and signatures. These are cease and desist orders, I explained, handing copies to Patricia, David, and Richard. They legally prohibit any member of the Hartwell family from making claims against my business, contacting my employees, or attempting to interfere with my company's operations in any way. Patricia's hands shook as she read the document. The legal language was ironclad, backed by evidence of their attempted fraud and supported by recorded conversations that could be used in court. Any violation would result in immediate legal action and potential criminal charges for attempted theft and conspiracy. Furthermore, I continued, my voice carrying the same confidence I used in boardroom presentations, I've filed formal complaints with the State Bar Association regarding the attorneys who helped draft your fraudulent partnership agreements. Attempting to defraud someone of their business assets through manipulation of marital law is both illegal and grounds for disbarment. The room was completely silent except for the sound of Patricia's ragged breathing. David looked like he might be sick. Richard sat motionless, staring at the legal documents that spelled out exactly how much evidence I'd gathered about their financial crimes. But the real devastation came with my final revelation. I've also provided copies of all evidence to the FBI's white-collar crime division, I announced, watching their faces drain of all remaining color. Your pattern of targeting successful entrepreneurs through romantic relationships constitutes organized fraud. The statute of limitations hasn't expired on your previous victims, and they are very interested in building a comprehensive case. My investigation had uncovered that Patricia's scheme wasn't limited to me. Over the past decade, she'd systematically targeted at least 7 other successful business people through various family connections, using similar tactics to extract money, claim ownership stakes, or force advantageous settlements. The FBI had been building a case against sophisticated romance scams targeting entrepreneurs, and my evidence provided the missing pieces they needed. David finally found his voice. "Sarah, please, can we talk privately? There has to be a way to work this out. I love you. This whole thing got out of hand, but my feelings for you are real." I looked at him with the clarity that comes from seeing someone's true character revealed completely. "David, you've spent 8 months gathering intelligence about my business for your family's financial benefit. You've lied to me, manipulated me, and participated in a scheme to steal everything I've built. The man I thought I loved never actually existed." Turning to address the entire room, I made my final announcement. "Obviously, tomorrow's wedding is cancelled. I want to thank everyone who came tonight to support what they believed was a celebration of love. Unfortunately, you've witnessed something quite different, the exposure of an elaborate fraud that could have destroyed my life's work." I gestured toward my business associates and investors who were present. "To my colleagues and friends in the business community, I want you to know that Invention Tech Solutions remains completely secure and unaffected by tonight's revelations. We'll continue our growth trajectory and upcoming acquisition discussions without any interference or complications. The personal cost was devastating, but the professional victory was complete. Not only had I protected my company from theft, I'd gathered evidence that would prevent the Hartwell family from targeting other victims. The same intelligence and strategic thinking that had built my business had been turned against people who'd tried to exploit those very qualities." As guests began filing out in stunned silence, many stopping to offer support and express their shock at what they'd witnessed, I felt a complex mixture of heartbreak and vindication. The relationship I'd believed in was gone, but the life I'd built was secure. Patricia made one last desperate attempt as she headed toward the exit. "Sarah, you don't understand the position you've put yourself in. Our family has connections, influence. This isn't over." I smiled with genuine warmth for the first time all evening. "Patricia, your family is facing federal investigation, multiple civil lawsuits from previous victims, and complete social ostracism from everyone who witnessed tonight's events. Your connections are about to become liabilities, and your influence just evaporated publicly. This is definitely over." 6 months later, the FBI's investigation resulted in federal charges against Patricia and Richard for mail fraud, wire fraud, and conspiracy. David cooperated with prosecutors in exchange for immunity, providing detailed testimony about his family's methods and previous victims. The case made national news as an example of sophisticated romance scams targeting successful entrepreneurs. My company not only survived the attempted takeover but thrived. The acquisition deal I'd been negotiating closed for $52 million, with my protected ownership structure ensuring I retained complete control of the proceeds. Invention Tech Solutions expanded internationally, opened offices in 3 new cities, and was featured in Harvard Business Review as a case study in entrepreneurial success and corporate protection strategies. The personal healing took longer than the professional recovery, but it came with valuable lessons about trust, intuition, and the importance of protecting what you've built. I learned that success makes you a target, but intelligence and preparation make you invincible. Most importantly, I discovered that the same qualities that made me successful in business, strategic thinking, careful planning, and the ability to see through surface appearances to underlying motivations, were exactly what I needed to protect myself from people who would exploit trust for financial gain. The story became a cautionary tale in entrepreneurial circles about the importance of asset protection and the sophisticated schemes that target successful business owners. But for me, it was proof that no one could take away what I'd earned through my own hard work, determination, and intelligence. Looking back now, I'm grateful for the betrayal that revealed who these people really were before I legally bound myself to them. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you turns out to be the best thing that could have happened. And that's the most satisfying justice of all, turning someone else's attempt to destroy you into the foundation for even greater success. Have you ever experienced family karma coming full circle like this? Sometimes the people closest to us reveal their true intentions in the most shocking ways, but I've learned that protecting yourself isn't paranoia, it's wisdom. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have signed those documents to avoid confrontation, or would you have exposed the truth like I did? I'm curious about your thoughts on family loyalty versus self-protection, especially when money and success are involved. The lessons from this experience changed how I approach relationships, both personal and professional. Trust is earned through consistent actions, not family connections or romantic declarations. Success requires protection strategies that go beyond just building wealth. You have to safeguard it from people who would manipulate relationships to access what you've earned. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and let me know in the comments what justice looks like to you. Have you ever had to choose between family harmony and protecting yourself? Share your experiences. I read every comment, and your stories often inspire future videos. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life drama stories about family betrayals, workplace revenge, and the complicated dynamics that happen when money, relationships, and family expectations collide. Ring that notification bell so you never miss the latest updates about karma, justice, and the wild situations that prove truth really is stranger than fiction. And please share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to protect yourself, even from people who claim to love you. Sometimes the most important relationships are the ones you walk away from. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, your success belongs to you, and no one has the right to take it away through manipulation or betrayal. Trust your instincts, protect your assets, and never apologize for safeguarding what you've built with your own hard work. Until next time, keep building, keep protecting, and keep believing that justice eventually finds everyone who tries to steal what isn't theirs.